Haven't been in a meeting here before. This is fantastic. Wow, we're in a small group now. Are we on?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, welcome everybody. This is the City of Salem's Climate Action Plan Committee meeting for Monday, June 16th. It's 1 o'clock. My name is Mickey Varney. I'm the chair of the committee. And so the members of the committee here, go ahead, please introduce yourselves.
Sure, Councilor Vanessa Wright, just point of order, are we streaming to YouTube? Okay, thank you.
Shane Matthews.
Okay, and online?
Yeah, good afternoon, Paul Tigan. Is there another point of order? Is there a way we can like tilt the camera down just a little bit? There's so much wall and so little of you.
Yeah, I can see us, we're right here, right?
Good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
I don't know, I felt
It's a
like this
beautiful
part was
wall.
my best feature.
Yeah,
All
I
the
wanna go
thinking
over and
goes
just kind of
on right
angle it
here.
down.
I am trying,
Sorry, do it
I
manually.
can put a book underneath that thing.
Oh, put a book on the back end,
I can totally do
like my
that.
phone or something.
I can.
Okay.
Sorry.
The Public Works Director is getting involved.
I also zoom out, but it doesn't seem to be doing.
Well, I can see where it's located, this table's positioned very close to where the camera is, so it's just a little bit of a challenge.
It's fine. Let's just push on. I just
No, I was just gonna say.
I think it's stuck.
Is it stationary?
Will it twist the, or
Oh,
the actual
it's
move it
kind
down?
of stuck
Yeah,
on
it's
there.
kind of stuck
No,
on
we
there.
tried.
We can't just prop it up.
The actual thing.
no worries.
Go.
There you go.
All right, there we go. Thank you.
This is why we need the private sector in government, right there. There we go.
And Councilor Nishioka has just joined us. She's an alternate on the committee.
Am I a national?
Hey, Juliana.
I think so.
that-
Let's see. Don't we have me, Shane, Vanessa, Paul's here? Yeah,
I think I'm just here.
okay. All right, you are just here. Okay, and boy, let's go around. Staff, next, please introduce yourselves.
Juliana Douglas, Climate Action Plan Committee Manager.
And Brian Martin, the Public Works Director.
And members of the public?
Jim Chucky, 350 Salem.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, next. Oh, that's.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted, since you were presenters and
Oh,
stuff
no,
too. No, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Marissa Tev, I'm with Quiet Clean Salem.
Okay,
And Debbie Miller, I'm with the Salem Parks Recreation Advisory Board and Quiet.
well, welcome, everybody.
And Krishna Namburi, interim city manager.
Oh, okay, great. Sometimes it's hard to see everybody online and everything. Oh, there, okay. Oh, the participant list really helps. On the big screen. Okay, the first order of business we have is public comment, and I believe Jim Shefty, you have public comment for us?
Sure do. Is this the spot?
That is the spot.
I have a handout for you. Don't start my 3 minutes. Handout for you.
I don't even have a timer. For clock, there's a
Thank you.
clock.
Well, thank you for having me today. I'm Jim Shetty. I live in Ward 2, but I'm speaking here on behalf of 350 Salem. And I want to start by saying that 350 Salem, along with our allies Beyond Toxics and the Valley Neighbors for Environmental Quality down in Corvallis, and mostly due to the effort of our good Senator Patterson, have actually, you can tick off this strategy number MW22, explore how to send waste to landfill other than Covanta plant. We did that. And that happened, the Covanta plant stopped taking garbage at the end of December. And we actually talked to the manager, and there were 3 reasons why that plant shut down, just so you know. The first was deferred maintenance. They had millions of dollars of deferred maintenance. The second was they lost their biggest medical waste customer, Stericycle, which opened their own incinerator in Reno, Nevada. And that was huge to lose that customer. And the third was Senate Bill 488, which we worked on with Senator Patterson to require them to do continuous monitoring of toxic emissions. And that was, they said that was the third reason they didn't see how they could comply with that. So anyway, we were thrilled that that happened. But we kind of traded one problem for another, because now 87% of Salem's or Marion County's garbage is going to the Coffin Butte landfill north of Corvallis. And there's 13% that's going out to Wasco County, but 87% is going to Coffin Butte. And Coffin Butte has huge problems. The biggest is what this handout talks about. They are a super emitter of methane. According to the EPA, landfills that emit more than 100 kilograms per hour of methane are called super emitters of methane. And methane is 28 times more powerful as a greenhouse gas than CO2. So it's a terrible, terrible thing. And this handout will tell you all about it. It shows you a map of the plume from the Coffin Butte landfill. They were emitting 1,600 kilograms. So that's 16 times the super emitter level. And there's a picture here of what's happening. There's the cover of the landfill has all kinds of leaks. The EPA has inspected Coffin Butte twice in the last few years. Once in 2022, they found 61 leaks. And in 2024, they found 41 leaks. There were 10 times over the limit, and some with explosive concentration. So there's a huge problem at Coffin Butte in controlling methane. Coffin Butte Public Services is the owner. They're trying to expand it. As you might imagine, we're totally opposed to expansion of the Coffin Butte landfill, given all these problems. And then if you look on the backside, this is really interesting because there are landfills that do manage to control their methane emissions. This one in Arlington is called the Columbia Ridge landfill. It's 3 times the size of Coffin Butte by acreage, and it's more than that even by capacity. And they only emit 105, in this test, they were only emitting 105 kilograms per hour. So Coffin Butte emitting 16 times what this landfill is doing. So we're trying to prevent the expansion of Coffin Butte landfill. We're insisting that they deal with their methane emissions. The EPA, whether the EPA will do anything about what they found is kind of doubtful with the new administration. So we're hoping DEQ might step in. They've been telling us they won't do anything because EPA is doing it. But if EPA doesn't do it, DEQ needs to step up. But this is where 87% of our garbage is going. So we are the biggest contributor to this. And you as the Climate Action Plan Committee, we think should be aware of this, and hopefully we'll work to mitigate this over time. We think this landfill just needs to close as soon as possible. If we could send our garbage out to Eastern Oregon, to Arlington, that would be terrific. To have ever sited a landfill in Western Oregon with all the rain we get and it was never a good location, but that's what's happening. So anyway, thank you very much.
Wow, well, I appreciate the update, the information. And so I'm assuming Arlington is less just because of the climate?
That has a lot to do with it. Methane's caused by the organic waste a lot of food waste. We estimate that 24% of what goes into Coffin Butte is food waste. So yeah, but if in a drier climate, it's not as bad. It doesn't create as much methane. But the big solution would be to eliminate that food waste, and that's why we're talking to this ladies committee about that.
Yeah, we're
I mean,
solid waste
that
committee.
would be the way to really solve the problem, is to just not have the methane generated by all the organic waste.
Yeah, challenge. Any questions from committee members?
A question I wouldn't necessarily expect us to answer today, but one I would be interested in having staff find out for us is what would be the cost of sending our garbage to Columbia Ridge compared to Coffin Butte? I'm sure there's a cost of transporting garbage anywhere, and obviously that's a greater distance, so I'd just like to know what would that cost be? And I'm assuming it would be a greater cost because it's a further distance away, but maybe not, we don't know.
We're already sending 12% to Wasco County, which Arlington is not that far from Wasco County. It's just a little bit east of that. And that would be a question for Marion County commissioners, because they're the ones that direct us where our garbage goes.
Right, but we can't direct Marion County staff to lift a finger when it comes to this sort of thing, but we could ask our own staff to just inquire what the cost would be. Perhaps there are other sister cities out there who send their garbage to Columbia Ridge. We can just ask them, what is the price per pound or whatever. I mean, I don't know how simple or complicated it is because I don't do this work for a living. But I would at least like to know, would it be prohibitively expensive to make this change or not? So, I mean, I would be curious.
People say the CO2 emissions from transportation of the solid waste is a problem. But, because Coffin Butte is obviously much closer, but
Sure.
if methane is 28 times more powerful as a greenhouse gas than CO2, which is what comes out of vehicles, if you do that calculation, it might be interesting to see. It still might be less greenhouse gas emission to send it to Columbia Ridge. Like some real person really good at math should do that.
We
Sure.
we can talk with the solid waste committee staff members and come up with something just to give a high level.
Right.
Sure. Yeah, that would be helpful because there's the transportation, there's wear and tear on the roads, what
Sure.
alternatives do we have rail alternatives? I mean, there are a lot of things.
Actually, our county commissioner Cameron is very interested in rail. And he talks about the closure of Coffin Butte, which I'm really glad to hear him say that. And what do we do when that happens? And Coffin Butte has maybe 7 years of capacity left or something like that, if they don't do the expansion. So he talks about rail, which really might be great.
That seems like a great option. I also was thinking about rail. Madam Chair, I have one other question.
Yes, please.
It's somewhat related. I know there was some pending legislation earlier this year that I think Senator Patterson had spearheaded, and I'm spacing on the Senate bill number, but I know you had mentioned it to me before, Mr. Shepke.
Yeah.
What is the status of that bill, if you know?
Good news, Senate Bill 726 that's passed the House and Senate. I write about this at the very end of this handout.
Okay, good, thank you.
It's passed the House and Senate, it's in the governor's office. It was amended. It was originally going to apply to every municipal landfill in the state, and what it requires is advanced monitoring for methane, because the reason Coffin Butte has such a problem is they do a terrible job of monitoring. They literally have a guy walking around with a little thing like this, it's like a metal detector, and he walks around, doesn't work. But this bill will require advanced technology like there's drone technology that we're very excited about that can fly over the whole landfill. And that bill is gonna pass, it has passed. It's going to apply to Coffin Butte beginning in 2027.
Is it methane invisible?
Yes.
So what would the drone see?
Oh, but it can see it. That's what you can detect it. That's what this is. And this is actually detected by a satellite.
Okay.
So you can see it, you can't smell it. What you smell coming out is all kinds of other options.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Any
thank you very much.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your time and the
you.
information. Yes, thank you. The next item on our agenda is approval of the April 21st, 2025 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Second, moved and seconded. Any discussion at all on it? So all in favor, just say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So it passes. The next item is our first presentation on EN 12, the Municipal Energy Master Plan with Don Christensen and Paul Kyla.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So we are working with Cummings Group, and Paul will be leading the presentation. And this is on our EN 12 Municipal Energy Master Plan, which was funded through the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant that we received earlier this year.
Hi all, Paul Kyla with Cumming Group, and I'm the Director of Energy at Cumming, and I'm going to be leading the presentation, as Juliana said. Let Dawn introduce ourselves, and then we can get going.
Hi, Don Christensen with Cumming Group. Paul and I are working together on the master plan presentation.
So forgive me, but I'm going to go off camera while I'm presenting so I can get a better view of the slides, and I'm going to be sharing here in a second. So let me get set up here. Okay, can you all see my screen? Does that look good?
It hasn't loaded yet.
Oh, okay. There must be, there's a lag, so let me know when you can see it. Maybe I just showed it again. Okay, here it is. Try that.
Yep, it's.
That's good. All right. I will try to allow enough pause in between slides so you catch up. So we have I think it's basically about 30 minutes here. I have about, I don't know, 10 slides or so there should be enough time for a discussion along the way, but we do have also additional time for Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions as I'm going through anything, please, raise your hand, and maybe Juliana, you probably have a better view of things than I have. If you can see, if anybody has a specific question, you can just have me stop and try to address that question.
Will do.
Wait, maybe I see something on my screen here. That's the actual video here. So with that, okay. So with that, so here's our agenda. We're going to go a little bit through the background of the project, our overall approach, kind of what where we're at in terms of the overall schedule and next steps, and talk a little bit about funding for the future. And then, like I say, there's a little bit of time for discussion and Q&A. But again, interrupt me if you have any specific questions. So just for a point of background, City of Salem partnered with the U.S. Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Lab a couple years ago to kind of start scoping out this effort. And through that project, the NREL suggested this be looked at in two different phases. So the phase one was looking at the municipal buildings specifically and the energy use at those buildings. And then phase two was looking more about like infrastructure and utilities and things like that. So what we're working on now is just the phase one. So the phase one is going to continue on through this year. And then, phase two is a future effort. So what I'm talking about today is really just about that first phase around municipal building energy usage and how to, identify more opportunities for reducing the energy usage and the cost of operating those buildings. So the goal of this effort is to create a comprehensive plan that identifies specific strategies that can be used and implemented to reduce the non-renewable energy use through the municipal buildings. And it just it's important to say it's non-renewable energy because we're not looking at any kind of solar opportunity. There is an element of this, and I'll get into a little bit in terms of energy resiliency, that solar and storage comes into play a little bit, but we're not specifically looking at the solar opportunity on municipal buildings or across the city. So we're really looking at just reducing the existing energy use through electricity and gas right now. So our overall approach is we started this. We'll get into a schedule here in a little bit, but we've been working on this for a couple of months. But we're first looking at all the buildings within the cities that are owned and operated by the city, and really looking at how energy is used today. So we've got a lot of data from utility billing data, so looking at specific meters, aligning those to the buildings, and seeing over a historical period of time how much energy is used, just to get a profile of what's being done out there today, and that will essentially set the baseline conditions of what we're looking at. The next phase of our data analysis is really going to be getting out in the field and looking at specific buildings and get a better sense of the systems that are in place at the buildings, the overall construction of the buildings, so we know better, the kind of the vintage, any kind of issues with the building itself in terms of the building envelope, any kind of leakage type things. So we'll get into a little bit more specific data analysis around the actual building. So far, everything today has kind of been, I would just say, paper review and analysis. So this is kind of basically the task that we're at right now. So like I said, we've done this baseline conditions assessment, looking at the existing buildings, looking at we spent a little bit of time really identifying the building inventory itself, because of the phase 1 and the phase 2 approach, not all buildings are being looked at. Some of the things around more of the infrastructure type things like water, wastewater types things. Those kind of buildings like that are not part of this process, pumping, that kind of things. We're looking again more at the specific buildings. So we spent a lot of time working on identifying those exact buildings that we're going to look at, lining up the building data with that, and doing this benchmarking. So we've basically have more or less finished that, and we're transitioning over into the next phase of the data collection, which, as I said, is getting into the actual specifics of the building. And then through that process, we're going to start to identify this task 2, essentially, opportunities to reduce consumption. So there's 3 basic areas that we're going to be looking at. Our building upgrades, and that's like upgrades to mechanical systems, lighting systems, things like that. Are there any specific opportunities around electrification? And that will really eventually feed into the solar question. As you electrify buildings, you can offset a lot of that through solar, and of course, reduce a lot of your greenhouse gas emissions that way. And then we also want to look through any kind of building envelope upgrades. If there's things that can be done to seal the building better, make a tighter fitting building, so you don't have to use so much heating and cooling, and keep the occupants comfortable and well ventilated. So those are the 3 main areas that we're going to be looking at, and we're just working now with the team, with Juliana and others, to kind of schedule those site visits, which look like they're probably going to be coming into next month. Then after that will really conclude then our data collection piece, these first 2 tasks. We're going to then go back and do a lot of analysis around that data, some energy modeling and other things like that, to really look at where we can, what those opportunities are, how much they can save, and then forecasting future savings over time, extrapolating those savings across building stock and different things like that, so we can get a really good picture of, again, from the first 2 tasks, the baseline of what the energy is being used today, kind of a realistic forecast, what can be achieved by making some very strategic, project, implementation upgrades and stuff like that. And then we'll prioritize that kind of work, make our recommendations based on the financial and capital budget constraints, the payback and things like that. We'll also are starting to kick off a little bit, which will kind of run in parallel, this resiliency effort, and looking at, specific areas around where we need to address resiliency. Typically that happens a lot with emergency operations centers, heating and cooling centers, things like that. There may be some opportunity for some microgrids to consolidate. We're working with another client, another city customer, looking at the civic center, the city hall and community center and things like that, and bringing it all on a separate microgrid. So that's kind of all part of this resiliency effort, is looking where those kind of opportunities lie. And then, after all that is kind of what opportunities are there to fund a lot of this work. So there are currently a number of grants, incentives, and financing mechanisms to do a lot of this work. It's an ever-changing environment right now related to that stuff. So as I've told several customers, once you kind of put something down on paper, it can easily change, because there are, as we see with the current political environment, there's different emphasis that's happening out there right now. So some of these grants and things that are identified today may not be there tomorrow, but what we want to do is characterize everything that there's funding opportunities as of today that as we put this report out, so we can document that and then monitor that stuff into the future. And then we'll make our final recommendations about how the city should progress in terms of reducing energy use across the facilities, and then put together a final report later in the year for the city to basically will serve as their roadmap for the future.
Paul, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
On that slide and then the slide before that, there was a acronym under secondary
Oh,
data
yeah.
sources. I don't know
I
what that
skipped over
acronym
that
was.
one. Yeah, that's the Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey. It's and I think it's done by the Energy Information Administration, which
Okay.
is, I think, a subset of the DOE. And it's basically they do these long, exhaustive studies, and they come out I forget exactly how many years, but there's quite a bit of time in between, maybe at least 5 or 6 years or so, where they just do a lot of research on commercial building stock across the country and really do a lot of characterization of how much energy is used on a per square foot basis, how much of that energy is used by HVAC, air conditioning, how much is used by lighting, different things like that. So there's a lot of analysis that is used. And so it's a very exhaustive data source, and it
Okay.
serves as a basis for a lot of analyses that we can use to see how we can, when we look at the benchmarking of Salem, municipal buildings, and it uses so many, either kilowatt hours or BTUs per square foot, we can look at that and kind of compare that to the CBEX data and say, okay, that's higher or lower compared to the national averages. And they also have them regionally. So there's Western region and different things like that. So we can kind of compare those as well. And just to get a sense of how the existing building stock looks in comparison to kind of similar types of buildings.
Okay, thank you. And then on the next slide, under the funding sources, funding opportunities.
ESPC?
ESPC, I don't
Yeah,
know.
sorry about acronyms. I always forget that acronyms are not. I live acronyms all day long, so these seem like they're more part of my common speak, but I understand that a lot of people don't understand that. So this is Energy Savings Performance Contract. There's a number of contractors and entities. They call them ESCOs, which is Energy Savings Contract, Energy Saving Contract. I forget actually what ESCO stands for because they use the acronym so much, but basically it's a contractor that comes in and they will do a shared savings approach where they will basically, you will pay for the project through the savings that the project achieves. So if it achieves, just say an estimate is $1 million a year for the project savings, that's $1 million would be applied towards the project, and essentially the ESCO would be paid over time through that savings. So basically, it's a way of financing an energy project.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for interrupting me as I get ahead of myself on acronyms. So here's a kind of just a high level look at our timeline. Like I said, we started this off earlier in the year. We had basically the first month or so was getting started with the city coming up with a specific vision of what we were trying to look at. And then there was a lot of time and effort spent on collecting a lot of the data in terms of utility building information, and again trying to correlate that to the actual buildings out there to know what we had. We then spent some time doing our priority list because again we're not looking at all the buildings. We're going to look at, I think we're up 50 plus of the buildings. We try to do a good representative sample. So we're looking at, instead of looking at all police stations, we're going to look at 1 or 2 police stations, but then extrapolate that data to all of them. So that's kind of our approach to the buildings. We're going to start collecting that data. As I say, we're going into June and July now, starting to do the field data collection. And then getting the analysis side of that and resiliency happening, doing all our modeling. And then basically through that will be done through the summer, and then in the fall we'll be really putting the report together. And I don't know the exact date, but I know we're coming back to this group when we get to the final stages of this around this time frame to kind of talk about the recommendations and get some feedback from this organization before we get into the actual publishing of the final report at the end of the year. So yeah, like I say, I've said this a couple of times, but our next steps is looking again at the 50 buildings, getting in depth to how those buildings are using energy, so we get a better sense of how what you do see in benchmarking is an overall building usage per square foot, but what you don't know is how that kind of splits out. So we want to get a good sense of how that breaks out. So know if there's any, as I mentioned, to that CBEX data, it's a good comparison to look at. How does it look overall? But if we want to compare specific systems to that, you really need to get a little bit better handle on that. So that's what we're going to do out in the field. So we'll be doing that over the next month or so, coming back and doing our data analysis, and then get into our final reporting here towards the end of the year, like I said. So just to quickly highlight, so as I said, some of the funding stuff is it's an ever-changing kind of situation that we're in, but we try to keep a look at all federal, state, and local incentives that are out there and grant opportunities. So this is kind of an initial pass at what we're going to be doing some detailed look into and what opportunities are there to fund some of the city's investment into energy efficiency. So there's a number of federal programs that still exist today through the Department of Energy and EPA. There's also a number of state and local programs, and some state programs are funded by Department of Energy grants, but those grants have already been allocated. So those are, at least at this point in time, are not necessarily being clawed back in any way. So a lot of the states have programs that are in place that have already have a budget set aside and are being funded today. So there we'll look at a lot of those things and identify those opportunities, and then as well as utility incentives, which I think most people are familiar with. The utilities themselves have a lot of funding for different types of incentives to fund energy efficiency and electrification and other types of things. So then we'll also look at these alternative models, which, I mentioned the Energy Savings Performance Contract already, but there's also another concept of Green Revolving Fund, which is essentially a very similar mechanism, but it would be a city's self-funded energy savings performance contract, essentially, where the savings that you accrue through a project would be basically paid back internally, and that money that sits in a pool of funds would be used to fund future projects. So we've done that. I looked at that in a number of different situations, and it's there's some cities and other clients are more successful with those others. It definitely is. There's a administrative impact to trying to do that and making sure the budgets all align and you can account for that money and all that stuff. But we'll get into that in our report and more details around that. But we really want to leave this at the end of the day, not just with a plan that says here's everything that you can do and kind of let you try to figure out how to actually implement that stuff. This will then be the next stage, is how do you can leverage a lot of these programs to help fund a lot of those activities. I think that's the actual end of my slides. So if there's any more specific questions about anything I covered, we can go back, or any other questions that anybody has.
Anyone have questions? Councilor Nordike?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question as to what is, and this might be more for Public Works Director Martin, what funds are we using to pay for this master plan update? Are these general fund dollars? Is this a different revenue stream? I'm just curious, what resources are we using to pay for this update?
It's the grant from the Department of Energy, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant.
Okay, did that require matching funds from us? Great. Sounds pretty awesome, well done. Thank you for getting that grant. Those are easier said than done to apply for. That's great news. I'm excited. Will we at some point get a list? You said that there would be a building priority list. Out of curiosity, I'd love to just see the list of buildings that you'll be prioritizing. So.
Yeah, we definitely have that list. So, Juliana has that as well. So, I don't know, Juliana, if you want to share that directly with how you want to do that, or if you want us to, or we can talk about that offline when that happens.
Sorry, I can share that.
Oh, go ahead.
I just had a question. So, and I think the answer to this is probably yes, just because of what you were kind of describing through that ESPC program, but kind of that final report, will it kind of not only come in with energy savings projection, but also potentially financial savings projection for if we were to do this project, that way you can kind of see what your cash on cash return are on each project?
I think that's yes, with a caveat that it won't be specifically like saying, okay, you're going to put in. There will have to be more analysis done when a more specific project comes up. So this is a higher level plan that's going to look at, on this, for example, and I have not seen the building, so I can't say this is true or not, but if there's a lot of opportunity for upgrades to LED lighting, for instance, in facilities, we would highlight that and say, the potential energy savings from that is X, the financial savings would be, Y, but you would need someone to actually go in there specifically count actual fixtures to know exactly how many lights are involved with that, and then calculate those savings. And that's what the ESCO would do as part of that energy savings performance contract. They would go in and they would do that really detailed analysis of the specific project details on whichever buildings we're going to be focusing on for that. So.
That's one more follow-up.
Yeah, please.
So with that, on the same kind of premise then, so let's assume the LED example you just kind of mentioned, will it at least give us like a projection of how much the project itself would cost?
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
As you are probably aware, our civic center is undergoing a massive series of renovations. It seems to me like now's the perfect time to be looking at ways to improve the building envelope and other efficiencies. So how is your research and your study going to interface with the fact that that series of buildings is undergoing a lot of improvements right now?
I can answer this real quick.
Okay.
So we tried to see if we could interplay something like an energy savings performance contract into that. But we were just too far, and this was last year, we were too far along to add that level of scope into the project. And then there was problems with conflicting contracts. So an ESCO is a separate contractor than the what's the bid contract?
Yeah, we have a progressive design build,
Yeah.
which we've had that contract in place for probably 2 years or so.
So it was, we wouldn't be able to do both unless we had that earlier on into that contract.
So at what point in time will his team assess the energy efficiencies and all these other things for the civic center? Are they gonna wait until after it's done then, or I'm just curious how that works?
We're still working with facilities to figure out what would make the most sense, if it would be to do like virtual going through the VAS, which, forgive me, I don't remember what that stands for, but it's like the computer system for the heating and air, or if it would be to go in and go through that checklist.
Okay, all right. Well, I know we already save a lot of money because a lot of this outdoors. You have to keep a parka on late during parts of the year, so.
Sounds very efficient.
Saving a lot of money.
Yeah, any questions online?
Just
Oh, okay.
to piggyback off that a little bit, and just so I'm clear, so I guess it just wouldn't make sense to me for us to do any type of assessment on the civic center the way it sits right now. So I'm assuming this report won't include our current civic center in its condition that it is now. We'll either wait till after, or we just won't do one on the civic center. That's kind of what I'm taking away from that.
There might be a middle ground of looking at the civic center and giving the laundry list of upgrades that are going to be made. And so then, if we're making upgrades on XYZ, then that wouldn't be part of the evaluation, but we aren't making upgrades on everything. So it would still make sense to do some parts of the evaluation.
I had a quick question.
We're happy to talk about it offline too with you and kind of strategize a little bit on how to address that.
Okay. Well, the building we're in today, the Public Works Operations Building, is like the Cadillac, not Cadillac, but it just has so many of these features being new. I mean, the microgrid, renewable energy, everything. How will it be used in this analysis, comparison, whatever?
And that's a good example. I mean, it's a good, it's almost like it could be highlighted in terms of the report about like what's happened there and how that can be used elsewhere. So, I mean, this really essentially what we're trying to do is help, transition kind of the lessons learned maybe from what you've got in your existing public works building to other types of buildings, because that's kind of the model of what you want to do. So we'll be looking at all the other buildings and where we can help prioritize and focus the best opportunities, and then to the extent that it makes sense to go to the extreme of what's renewable. And again, renewable is not really on the table right now. That's part of more of another phase. But in terms of getting the core building operations under control in terms of as efficient as possible, which is always the best strategy to do before you get into renewables anyways, because you want to reduce the energy usage within the building before you put a lot of solar onto it. So get that operations under control today, then look at solar opportunities and battery storage and the resiliency down the road. So that's kind of the overall approach to this effort.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor Murray.
Thank you. Your scope of work is all about updating hardware and infrastructure, but I can imagine some intersectionality between that and energy efficient policies, like a hybrid remote work office where you have fewer offices to heat and cool, and because you allow remote work where it's appropriate. And of course, subject to a variety of collective bargaining agreements and so on. So is it fair, but it seems to me that part of your recommendations could be, for example, about using more of the hotel suite model for working spaces, ones that have motion activated lights that don't turn on unless someone is actively in that office, because you can no longer assume that someone is going to be in their chair 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. So I'm just curious, not everything is within the scope of your contract, but I can see how there might be some overlap.
Yeah, definitely. And we're not getting into kind of that policy kind of part of this effort, but building controls are probably one of the biggest opportunities to do with, because I mean, if you don't have, you can put in all the efficient light and the efficient air conditioning you want, but if it's not controlled effectively, it's not going to work. So if you're running, if the space is not occupied and you're cooling it down to 70 degrees, you're not really saving energy. So really a whole lot of what we do is controls, and a lot of that stuff. And I don't know exactly if this is what we'll get into when we get into the field, what kind of control systems are in place today. But one of the big things to look at is how to improve the existing controls, because a lot of times those buildings, everything's changed over time. The operation changed over time, like you say, like if people there's more of a hybrid work schedule and now post-COVID than there was before, but if the controls haven't been updated to address that, there's probably using a lot more energy than you need to be, and the controls can be changed and with the existing systems and they're generally low cost types of opportunities, because you don't need to go in and put new systems. You just need to get better control of the existing systems that are there. So that will all factor into what we're looking at and how we prioritize the efforts over time. But like I said, we won't get into the policy elements of that, and but any good operations would have a top-down policy about how you guys are going to engage with energy and kind of the overall philosophy behind that, and how. So that would be kind of like maybe a next steps that come out of the report, and kind of here's like the next phase you can go into and what you can look at into the future and kind of start to have those conversations.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. That was really helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us. And like I said, we'll be back later in the year with an update on where we're at. So looking forward to that conversation as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, next on our agenda is in regards to strategy EN 37, gas powered leaf blowers, internal policies, contracts, and community. And we have a couple of guests here, Debbie Miller from Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board and Marissa P. from Quiet Clean Salem. I wanted to mention, as a previous member of the Salem Parks and Rec Advisory Board and the liaison, at our meeting last week, we were just talking about basically the chair of the committee created 3 committees back in February of 2024 to research topics which supported our emission goals and our climate action plan. And so members of the SPRAB have been making reports in these 3 areas. One was electric equipment use, one was climate friendly transportation, the other one was low carbon materials and capital projects. And their goal of that was to eventually come up with some recommendations to bring to City Council. So we're very fortunate today to have both Debbie Miller from the Parks and Rec Advisory Board and Marissa to help out. So go ahead.
All right. I don't know how I change slides on here.
I got you.
You got it,
Yeah.
okay, good. All right, so my name is Debbie Miller. I'm a member of SPRAB, the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and like we were told, we had 3 committees, and one of them was this one, which was electrification of landscaping equipment. And so I'm gonna give you kind of an abbreviated presentation of what we talked about at SPRAB, and hoping that the city policy could maybe also, this is for parks, is why we did it, but maybe we could even take it to the city or even further than that. Next slide, please. So these are my committee assignment goals, the 5 of them, and that's what I'm gonna kind of go through these very quickly. Next slide. So how do the proposed policies align with emission reduction goals and or climate action plan strategies? So basically, next slide, we're gonna talk about what our climate action plan is, and you guys know this well. By 2035, we will have our greenhouse gas emissions down to 50% of the baseline of 2016, and by 2050, we will be carbon neutral. Next slide. Okay, so the climate action plan, as you guys also probably know, has 183 strategies across 7 different categories. So this particular one comes from EN 37, which is under the energy part of it. And it basically just says, we're gonna develop and implement a plan to phase out combustion in 2-stroke engines within the city limits. And this would pertain to vehicles, lawnmowers, leaf blowers, and other machinery. And we could potentially begin with phasing out city-owned combustion and 2-stroke equipment, like landscaping equipment such as leaf blowers and lawnmowers to demonstrate leadership. Next slide. Okay, so how does landscaping equipment actually affect the climate action plan? So the Salem Climate Action Plan didn't directly quantify this contribution to CO2 emissions that are made by landscaping equipment specifically. But they did talk about mobile non-road emissions, and mobile non-road emissions would include any kind of vehicle or equipment not designated for travel on major roadways. So if you include that in there, that would be our landscaping equipment, and that would be only about 3.2% of greenhouse gases. So not a huge impact all by itself. But when the City of Salem Council adopted the climate goals, they primarily addressed greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and carbon dioxide equivalents. But they also had co-benefits, and these co-benefits, you can see them outlined in the climate action plan, and they include public health and environmental quality, which there's a lot of benefits from landscape equipment in that category. All right, next slide. All right, so what are the emissions from off-road gasoline-powered equipment? Well, with this, it's not just the quantity of emission, it's the quality of emissions. So that's really important to keep in mind. This equipment is highly inefficient. It has incomplete burning of the fuel. A lot of it is 2-stroke engines, and it's an oil-gas mixture. It is not regulated tightly like car emissions. So although it only includes about 4% of carbon dioxide emissions according to the EPA, it includes many other pollutants with a high percentage of probable and known carcinogens like butadiene and benzene. So you can see on here that it's really disproportionate, the amount of benzene and butadiene compared with all of the emissions. This stuff really puts out a lot of stuff. 25% of all, including cars and everything, is from this kind of off-road gasoline-powered equipment. And butadiene is a probable human carcinogen, and benzene is a known human carcinogen. So this is a big impact, really disproportionate. Also, there's a disproportionate emission of other pollutants like volatile organic compounds. And these things contribute to asthma, heart disease, and lung disease. Next slide. Okay, so number 2 would be evaluation of existing city parks and policies. So this was easy because there is no official city park policy in place at this time. So last August, Parks and Urban Forestry were kind enough to review their current usage of electric landscaping equipment, and this is what they reported. So Urban Forestry uses Husqvarna brand, which has a really good commercial brand of landscaping equipment, and they use that primarily, and it actually accounts already for 27% of their current equipment, so that's good. And they have completely transitioned to lithium-ion Husqvarna chainsaws that their crews use when they're on the buckets or climbing trees. They like these saws because they're just as good as the gasoline ones for them, but they're also easier for their workers for a lot of different ways. It allows them to be efficient, but also has a lot of health and benefits that they experience, including the noise. And they're currently testing some of the newer backpack blowers, and they are finding that technology has improved a lot, and they do see their crews switching to these if they have money in the budget. Park staff reviewed theirs and they use a different brand. They use Still brand, which is also has a really good commercial line of products. And it's 21% of their current inventory as of last August. And they use a huge variety of equipment, as you can imagine. They did mention that they have these Still combi units that they found that have actually saved them money because I looked them up and they have one electric motor head, and then they have 15 or so attachments that go on, and they already had some of these attachments, so it saved them money. Next slide. So this one is not, we were not this was not a part of my presentation at SPRAB, but since we're talking about the whole city, there are other areas where Salem has landscaping equipment. Stormwater Quality does the bioswales and the creek cleaning, and they have 20 pieces of equipment. 4 of these are electric, so that's 20%. Stormwater Operations and Signs and Sweeping just basically have a couple diesel powered tractors that they use during the mowing season. Pumps and Controls, I couldn't get a response from them yet, I'm still working on that, but they do the pump station landscape maintenance. And I just mentioned as an aside that the State Capitol State Park has already converted to electric, and this includes a solar powered electric mower, which is really cool. Next slide. Okay, number 3, external resource identification. So just a real quick look at what is the rest of the country doing. And as you can see from this map, there are 26 states that have areas with regulations in place regarding gas-powered landscaping equipment. 3 of these states have banned or significantly restricted some 2-stroke engine equipment, including recently California. And over 150 cities and municipalities have limited or banned gas-powered leaf blowers. And this includes most recently Portland that they're going to be phasing in. So many of them with the green dots there, they have developed incentives such as rebates and tax breaks to encourage the purchase of electric lawn equipment. So they're using the carrot rather than the stick. Next slide, please. So the pros and cons analysis, in the interest of time, I'm just going to quickly mention the pros and cons. But suffice it to say that the gas-powered electric landscaping equipment is now very competitive in pricing and performance with gas-powered equipment. So the time has come. Next slide. There's also a significant human resource advantage to electric landscaping equipment. You can see some of those here, but it's much better for staff. Next slide. But there are some cons, some drawbacks, and this includes the increased costs upfront, which is a big deal. And there is a return on investment, and it can take 1.5 to 2 years. That's kind of a higher level. It's probably a little less than it in a lot of cases, but 1.5 to 2 years. Then it gets to be actually a money saver after a while because you don't have as much. They last a long time. They don't have as much. They don't have tune-ups and things like that, oil changes that they have to do. So there actually is a cost saving. And then another big drawback, and this one's harder to quantitate, is the infrastructure workflow. So you have to have charging stations. So that's kind of a new investment there. And then there's changes in workflow. So you can't get you can't have a big project with a piece of equipment with 1 battery. A lot of times you have to have 2 batteries or even 3 batteries if it's a big project. So when they go out in the field, they have to, instead of carrying a can of gas with them, they have to carry along extra batteries that are charged and ready to go that fit that equipment. So that's another thing to look at. And then the storage of the equipment is also a big deal because batteries have their best life at sort of moderate temperatures. They don't like it too cold or too hot. They like it just about right. So that's another thing that has to be considered in your workflow. Next slide. Okay, so number 5, what is our idea on approach that we from Salem Parks and Recreation that we're talking about? Next slide. So create a model policy for Salem Parks equipment electrification. So what I came up with, what we're talking about at the Parks Board is to say that wherever equivalently effective and competitively priced electric lawn equipment is available, that our new purchases should be focused on buying electric whenever possible. And that parks and urban forestry are already about 25%. So we have to find a reasonable goal. And I put a pretty optimistic goal here of 50% by 2030 and 100 by 2035. I don't know that we can get to that because a lot of it depends on budget. They can only buy a certain amount of equipment at a time on the lifespan of the equipment. So a gas-powered leaf blower might last 5 to 10 years, and you don't want to throw away a new one because there's a life cycle with that leaf blower as well. We can't afford that. So you want to look to see what can we replace, when does it need to be replaced, and try to phase it in, and that's a lot less painful. But there also are going to be exceptions because there's some things that just are too expensive, and they're like large lawn tractors. They have a long life, high cost. They were talking in parks about one they have there that is really great to use because it covers a lot of land for one person at one time. And it saves them on staff time, so they can mow things really fast, and it's gas powered, and I don't know that we're gonna find something like that we can afford right away. Okay, next slide. So this is what SPRAB might recommend to Salem Parks, and maybe it can be transitioned to the city as well. Something like park staff in charge of purchasing would be directed to procure battery electric tools for replacements when a suitable battery electric tool is identified with equivalent operational capacity and within cost premiums. So these should be prioritized over gas powered law equipment. So it's a kind of a gentle approach. And we may add on reasonable and achievable goals and deadlines. We would have to work with staff on this because we have to find out what equipment do they have, how old is it, how long is it expected to be around, and what do we have in the budget, how much can we buy at a certain time, and then we could come up with possibly if we want to do 2035, 2040, whatever we can reasonably do. So this also could be adopted not just for parks but for the city as a whole. Facilities, public works, they have landscaping that needs to be done, and so landscaping can be done to demonstrate leadership as we recommended as was recommended in the climate action plan. The last thing I want to mention is that we have a lot of outsourced landscaping work, so we have contractors, and we might adopt a policy or come up with something on that needs to be when it needs to be renewed, that gives preference to companies that offer electric landscaping options in Salem. So that's something I know Juliana looked a little bit into, but I really haven't. Next slide. So I just want to thank the people who helped me with this, and any questions that in my limited capacity I can answer, I would be happy to do.
I'm John Livingston, just a citizen, but urban forestry cut down a 2-foot diameter gum tree this past week in their, on city property, and they used steel gasoline chainsaws.
Oh, they did,
They didn't
okay.
have any electric equipment.
Oh, okay. I guess they haven't completely transitioned. That was led to believe, yeah.
Lots of great information.
Good,
Thanks just so much, so helpful, really. Questions?
One more part as well,
Oh, okay.
but I don't know if there are
Yeah.
specific, SPRAB specific would be for Debbie, and then I have like a more expansive version.
Okay,
with
that-
proposed
that's-
ordinance. Yeah, it'll be very quick. All right.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's okay. I think this is a great way to package them together and then we can ask questions
Yeah,
about
yeah.
both. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm
Hold
from,
on just one second, let me see if I can move this so then they don't have a black box in there.
that would be nice. Yeah. Thanks. Okay, so Marissa Tev, I'm from Quiet Clean Salem. We're part of a bigger group called Quiet Clean Alliance. It's a national group. We're one of the founding members. We've been doing this for about 2.5 years. Mentors are Quiet Clean PDX, who have a successful ordinance that got passed. Next, please. Just to lighten the mood a little comic here. When it comes to blowing leaves around uselessly and creating an insane amount of noise, this model can't be beat. Next, please. Yeah. And then we won't get into decibels here. We don't have time, but just for comparison, it's how loud something is, how you measure it. Electric leaf blowers are about 65 decibels, whereas if you look up top, a leaf blower, is about 115 to 120, something like that. Same as a concert or a chainsaw, so very loud. And the OSHA recommends that you have hearing protection at around 80. Next, please. Just a little screenshot here of some Consumer Reports information from last May. We are already surpassed the point at which gas models are less effective than the backpacks for the electric equivalents. I don't know why that word isn't there, but it should say electric on the right side there. Okay, and then, that's okay. We'll keep going. So the state has had a few opportunities to pass legislation related to phasing out gas-powered leaf blowers in different variations. They have all failed so far. We're assuming this one has failed as well. We haven't heard otherwise. Next. We do have a noise ordinance already. So the quiet part of Quiet Clean Salem. However, if you go on the city's website, it is not responded to. It's not enforced at this moment. So there's a further need to protect our citizens from noise pollution. Next.
We have been presenting to neighborhood associations. We are up to 7 that have endorsed our mission. We have more on the way that we've spoken to that are still voting, at a future meeting, and then also some that we're still presenting to in the future. Next. And then getting right to it, here's our proposed ordinance. Just wanted to throw this out at you all as the first introduction. And this isn't the ordinance, this would be the proposed code amendment. The ordinance, we have a draft of, it's about a page and has all the whereases where you would say the reasons why you want the ordinance, but this would be the meat of the matter, kind of how we would phase out gas-powered leaf blowers. And really, we just want to make America right again, so that's our goal. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So questions, team? Let me put this back. Councilor Tigan. Wow. What do you think?
Lots to chew on.
Yeah.
I guess I'll answer quick. So you mentioned, I think Portland was the one you mentioned has kind of more of an incentive program. That sounds like they also have a kind of restriction program, but you said other communities have looked at an incentive program. Or kind of a trade out program. How are they funding that? Are they funding that through city coffers? Are they funding that through grants? How are they funding this?
Portland's doing it through their county. And actually they just have a hiccup, I think, right now with trying to, definitely with enforcement, but also with the funding is what Michael was saying.
Yeah.
So they had a pot of money and it's gotten jumbled around, but it was supposed to come from their county. I don't know if either of our counties would be open to that. Certainly ask.
Well, and some of them are doing tax breaks, tax incentives. They'll have like one of the stores will give a rebate or something like that. If you bring your equipment in, someone will drop off their lawnmowers and they get a little voucher that they can take to a store to get an electric one on there. There's different things like that. Others say some of those ones that I showed with the green dots.
But I guess my question is, so like those tax rebates, are those coming from, obviously, I don't think anybody in this room is surprised we have a financial issue within the city. And so are those tax incentives coming from city or are they state funded? How are they funding those currently?
Yeah, I know their tax rebates
In some
of the states, but I don't know how they.
Got it.
Yeah, we looked into whether PGE had anything like that because they'd be selling more electricity. No, not yet, not right now. Yeah.
That's surprising.
Councilor Matthews, I wouldn't be surprised if the money for that from the city of Portland comes from the Portland Clean Energy Fund.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Another revenue raising model that they have in Portland for clean energy projects.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
And Councilor Tigan, correct me if I'm wrong, that clean energy fund, that was voted in by their voters. So that's a funding stream where they went to the voters and asked them if they were willing to contribute towards that, isn't that right?
Yes, but voters don't pay for it. It comes from the receipts from large retail organizations within the city. But it was voted in by the public in 2018.
Any other questions?
Well, going online, it says that some cities use federal funds like the state and local fiscal recovery funds, the SLFRF, to support electric equipment rebate programs. I don't know if that's a thing, but AI says it's a thing. So
My AI says that it must be.
I know. So, yeah.
Yeah, one of my concerns is what do we do with the batteries and how are we creating, manufacturing the batteries, the source materials? I mean, can we recycle them? I don't know. Those are just some questions I have about it. I mean, I think converting over to electric is a great idea, but also thinking about the other pieces of it.
It was interesting seeing the map showing that Portland is literally the only city in the state that has done anything. It was identified for a phase out. There was no place else on the map that has even adopted an incentive according to that map. So seems to me that a practical place to start would be with seeing what incentives can be offered there through federal funding. I'm surprised that places like PGE don't have a rebate for this already. But I'm kind of wondering, is this a sort of thing that, you know, contacting the League of Oregon Cities to find out? Because what if a majority of cities under the League of Oregon Cities put pressure on the state to say, hey, there's enough interest from several cities to create an incentive program and have the state get on board with that? I'm just wondering, I'm just looking at, you know, how can we make this work and how could we amplify our signal beyond just a single city interested in providing incentives and all, you know, and other sorts of things.
That was one of the failed bills, was an incentive.
So I saw that on there.
But do we know if the League of Oregon Cities was a supporter at the time? I mean, I could understand it might have failed for opposition from, say, the industry or others who don't want to be forced into an expensive change in equipment. But just because legislation fails one year doesn't mean it can't be addressed, rephased, rewritten, reconsidered at another time.
Sure, makes sense. Sure.
Yeah.
Councillor Tigan?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think there's kind of two things going on in the presentation, and the first part I think is the most doable part, right? Is what's totally within the city's control in terms of the city's purchasing, the city's operations.
Yeah.
I even, wonder if we could get even better data about the emissions of the city operation itself, because, compared to everyone else, we operate a sort of a disproportionate number of two-stroke cycle engines, right? We have a lot more leaf blowers than Target. We have a lot more leaf blowers than other just, people doing things in the city, whether it's string trimmers, you name it, this class of lawn care. And so to say, and they're so polluting that to convert one of them, I think one statistic I saw said that, a single leaf blower emits as much CO2 and global planet gases as, like an 18-wheeler. They're very bad. And if you have the ability to take those very bad polluters out of the system, then you actually have a really high return on the investment. So I think the question of, do we propose an ordinance or a phase out or something like for all of the leaf blowers in the city, that's a question worth asking. But I think this first question of, how we could even just adopt a policy within the city itself that as we go through the next 6 years of equipment change, that we always buy electric rather than gas powered. And I think that was part of the first presentation. And to me, that feels very doable without asking the bigger questions of passing legislation and things like that.
I agree 100%. I thought the recommendation, the draft recommendation to Salem Parks directing staff to procure these new pieces of equipment when a similar tool is identified with comparable operations capacity and within cost. I mean, that seems doable and it seems very practical.
I know, Councilor Tigan, you kind of mentioned seeing more about what the overall emissions and kind of our actual environmental impact would be. I think the part I'd be most interested in to see would be the financial impact. And, I only because Still was mentioned, I pulled up Still's website while we were sitting here, and it doesn't look to me like they're comparatively similar in price. Like on sale, the Still one, which is less powerful, but it's their most powerful battery one, is $1,400 versus their most powerful gas one is $650, and it is 25% more powerful than the battery one was. And so knowing that seems to be one of the, and I didn't look up the Husqvarna ones, trying to listen to the presentation at the same time, but those are kind of my biggest concerns. I don't know that many people would disagree that if it's the same price, it's quieter and it's more energy, or it's more environmentally friendly, why isn't everyone going to it? Like, you don't need an ordinance, you don't need any of these things, because ultimately I've never gone into a store and said, I'd like your least efficient, your most expensive, and your loudest products. Like, I want the worst product for the most money. That's not the most common thing, right? And so I guess that's where I'd be coming from, is I wanna know what is our actual financial impact to making that kind of assessment, and what do we consider to be the acceptable level of that? Like on cars, our EV numbers, I think, will pay up to 30% more for an all-electric vehicle in the city. Is that what we're willing to do within leaf blowers? Like, I think we gotta have to set some of those parameters to be able to say, what are we willing to do for that?
And also the cost of gas that would be eliminated, so there's not factored into the cost, the price, the sticker prices.
For sure, we'll start the electricity price
Yeah.
of charging the batteries.
Oil and maintenance.
Okay. Manager Namburi, do you have a question, comment?
Thank you. No, my kind of recommendation is, I'm not sure that if the staff have done any analysis on from the financial impact perspective. Now, with the community services and parks relying on the levy, I want to make sure that we have enough funding to go through the transition, and also some kind of a cost analysis has to be done. Brian, I sent you a side text just asking if you are aware of anything that we have done in the past. I know for Public Works we do that. I know Fleet division does a lot of analysis to kind of figure out the cost savings through these changes. So have we done anything like that, Brian?
I don't know the details. I know that we look at electric when we're purchasing new equipment, but I don't know the details of what that would look like. So I'd have to talk to Mark and Jim to see how they're evaluating those purchases, to see what it looks like. I don't know the details, Krishna.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I think there is a bigger conversation that we have to have is citywide. There are several opportunities for us to do things differently, but I think it's important to do that analysis before we move forward in a certain direction.
I do know that like with larger equipment, some of the technology is still evolving, and so we don't want to purchase something that's not quite there yet. But I think these smaller gas-powered equipment, things that hand equipment we're talking about, I think that technology has probably come a long way, and it's a lot easier decision. So.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, and plus if you can use the same battery on multiple tools, like your weed whacker and your chainsaw and blower, I mean, that's what I have, and it's just so nice just to be able to switch batteries.
Yeah, we do that with our Ryobi, you just plug it in and there you go, got all kinds of things you can do with it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we could probably, before the next meeting, look into what we've been doing up to this point and maybe have some suggestions or recommendations.
Okay.
Just a quick note, most of Public Works at least is contracted out, so it would be by Debbie's third bullet point on her recommendation. So if we were to look at that, we could do something to Councilor Matthews' point of having 2 bids go out when those are up, and have one be for all electric or electric at a certain date, and then one be for a traditional just gasoline powered.
You mean when we're contracting for the service?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have, so like the stormwater quality maintenance, which was in one of the slides, that's all done by City Resources, but the right-of-way landscape maintenance is done by a contractor. So as Julie mentions, as we look at renewing those contracts, we can get different bids and see what that cost would be.
Gotcha.
We still use, I know there was a time during the pandemic when we got rid of inmate work crews because for a variety of reasons, DOC just wasn't sending out its inmate work crews to do landscaping and such. Do we know what they use for equipment when they go out there?
I don't know. We do use, I know Parks uses inmate crews to some extent, and even the stormwater quality folks in Public Works, there's an inmate crew that supports us. But I don't know if they're using their own equipment or we're getting them equipment, but I can get more information on that. Sure.
And and if that's such a tiny percentage of our overall work, it's the research is relevant, but I don't want you to exhaust yourself trying to track down that one tiny percentage, the 1% of the 1%.
Okay,
right.
Thank you.
I don't see any further questions, so thank you for the presentation.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Continual conversation going on, continuing on this, yeah, very helpful. All right, next on our agenda is Climate Action Plan implementation updates.
I'm minusing you guys real quick, sorry. All right, well, thank you so much. Today, just going over a couple updates. So we did Bike Month and we had 6 events throughout the month. Pictured here is the kickoff event where we did a free helmet giveaway. Those helmets were provided by Chariots. And throughout the month, our Eventbrite page had a total of 628 views. And a lot of it was coming in and out, so we couldn't necessarily track everyone, but everyone that we could track was 98 attendees. And there were 2 workshops and 2 events and 3 2 workshops, 1 event, and 3 cycle opportunities. And we partnered with Chariot, Safe Routes to School, Salem Bike Vision, Salem Bicycle Club, Santan Bicycles, Scott Cycle, Northwest Hub, Bike Peddler, and the Salem Social Cyclist Club. The other workshop that we had was the solar and storage that was presented by Solar Oregon, and we had 23 attendees, including 4 households that were anticipating on adding solar and storage onto their house shortly. And then we are also working with Energy Trust of Oregon on the Commercial Strategic Energy Management, or CEM program, and we did treasure hunts at 5 of the 12 enrolled buildings. And from those, they were looking at various aspects of our building, similar to what the Municipal Energy Master Plan will be doing through those 50+ buildings. We went ahead and took these 5 off because they've already been treasure hunted, I guess. And from this, we found 28 quick wins, 7 low priority opportunities, 6 strategic wins, and 1 gem. So that's low cost and high reward. And I actually think that this is kind of awesome because it's not a lot, and we went to 5 different buildings. And as you can hopefully tell here, that filter is very clean. Our staff do a phenomenal job at maintaining all of our equipment, and I think that is something to speak really highly of. It helps extend the life of our buildings, and it helps reduce the energy consumption and energy costs. So the fact that they were already doing all of that before we went and checked in is always a good thing. So I wanted to highlight that as well. And then a couple of grant updates. So last year we came to City Council for permission to apply for the inline hydro project development assistance from the Energy Trust of Oregon. And because we're looking at it being at 2 sites, we actually have to consider those as 2 separate projects. And so instead of the original 200,000, we will be eligible for up to 400,000 because you get that per site. So that's pretty exciting. We'll be able to do more of that project development without touching city funds. So excited for that. And then we were also recently awarded about $25,000 from the Bloomberg American Health Initiative for the Network of Practice. And so here we are working with some of the same partners that we had for Bike Month, and we're going to be producing public service announcements for students and their families. And the program is titled Stride Smart, K-12 Pedestrian and Bicycle Education Initiative. So that will be hopefully addressing how people use our streets and roads.
A quick question on that. Will that include messages in Spanish or other languages?
Yes, we do have translation for Spanish, I'm sure, and there might be more. I'm gonna have to double check the grant on that.
Thank you.
Right, and then kind of a segue from Councilor Nordike's earlier comment on energy policy. We are creating a green team. We actually just got 18 staff members signed up last Tuesday, and they came from 14 different divisions. We have an intranet page. We are going to be doing programs specifically updating energy policy, but also promoting employee emissions reduction. So anti-idling campaigns, low emission commuting, or the Get There Challenge. And then we have new recycling mandates coming online, so helping with educating staff on that. And then we also have summer outreach, and next Monday at this time, 1 to 3, the Center 50+ will be having their energy and resource fair. And highly recommend anybody who has time to go and check it out. We're gonna have a lot of great partners there, and it's going to be helping people get their homes and themselves ready for our hot summer months, and that will hopefully include some weatherization and energy efficiency. We also have the World Beat Festival. We're gonna be tabling to reduce costs and staff time. We're actually grouping, I think, 6 different divisions, so then we're gonna have more coverage of city services, but only have one booth at the World Beat Festival. And then we're gonna be working to get our tabling at Inglewood Forest Festival, National Night Out, and we are also working for our fall workshop from Electrify Now.
Wow.
So I went super fast so that I could get us done, but if you have any questions or anything, I'll
The energy resource fairs for anybody, right?
I just want to let everyone know that I have sent that flyer out to all of my neighborhood associations, so it's gone out to all the neighborhood associations, and those of which I share with Vanessa or Shane. They've received it, and also Paul. So just updating you on that.
Yeah, this strikes, thank you, Linda, that's excellent. I'm wondering, is this something that you can forward to Irma to just blast out to all the neighborhood associations?
That would be very helpful. Okay. Pardon? Councilor Tigan? Yeah. Comment?
Oh, yeah, I just thought I'd note for the record that my neighbor's Monday afternoon mow and blow has begun. So I might have a hard time hearing what's going on in the high decibel level from their operations. This is usually the time I walk away from work, but yeah, just thought I'd let you know.
Thank you. I have to remember that one.
You can find on Instagram lots of memes of people who love to turn on their leaf blowers at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning. It's like, oh, it's Saturday morning at 7 a.m. Got nothing better to do. So, yeah, it's a thing. No, the noisiness is absolutely a thing. Yeah, it's well known.
Yeah, lots of info. Any last questions?
Great work, and I appreciate the presenters and how hard they worked on
I
their
have a couple
presentations.
Yes.
John Livingston. I moved up here 4 years ago from Redding, California. And the county buildings there in their parking lots, I know we're not into solar yet, but on the study, but they put canopies in all the county parking lots and in the district attorney's parking lots. And so that provided shade, of course, was really helpful, but they put solar panels on it, and the payback was so quick. It was like a no-brainer. If you can rearrange your parking lot with south-facing solar, and it was employee parking as well as public parking could be underneath it in the shade. They were generating a lot of solar electricity, and it really, I'm not sure how they funded it at all, but it was a instant success.
Isn't that what we have at the police station?
Yeah, we have solar at the police station.
Yeah.
And at this
Oh,
building,
the parking.
in the library, so any new
Parking
building we
areas.
do or significant improvement, we have that in solar.
You were saying that one basically like created like covered parking space
Yeah.
because the panels would be.
Big, tall, real tall, like 20 feet tall.
Yeah.
Well, and it keeps the rain off, keeps the,
Dual purpose.
yeah, lots of, I mean, it's so attractive to park out of the heat.
We'll get the county right on.
Sure. No, thank you for that. Okay, everyone. Well, our next meeting is August 18th. Probably here, more than likely.
This building, not this room.
Okay, all right. So thank you for everything. The meeting's adjourned.